welcome to another episode of Tailored Healing TV. I am your host, Taylor, and here we talk about all things tech, AI, metaphysics, futurism, and what is happening in our reality versus the world of entertainment. This week, we're going to discuss a little bit about the shows Black Mirror and Severance. I posted a few clips earlier this week to give hints as to what we would be discussing. And earlier this year, Apple TV released their newest season of the show Severance. Severance is a psychological thriller about the separation of the innie and the outie, the conscious self versus the unconscious self, who hold a position at a company called Lumen. When they enter Lumen, they sever their own consciousness. So anything that happens in the workplace, they do not remember once they exit. The minute that I saw the show being promoted, and I came onto the show pretty late, I didn't come on till season 3, which is the most recent one. I had to start watching because Apple, already being a technology company, and a few of the shows that I've already seen on there are something that seems like it's trying to penetrate the psyche. I decided to go ahead and watch it and was immediately hooked. And immediately, also, I started realizing the parallels between the main character, Mark, who loses his wife, Gemma, and this is the reason he takes the position as Severance, and he ends up looking exactly like Steve Jobs to me. Steve Jobs, the founder of Apple. It automatically made me question, why in the world would they show someone who looks like Steve Jobs? And so I started exploring, the parallels between television and real life. Lumen being a company that severs the consciousness really made me think about 1984 and how that was a setting point for everything happening in our reality now. Obviously, things happen in a cycle. We always get new technologies or something that threatens or encourages the wave of the next generation of consciousness. But when I really started identifying what happened when the Macintosh computer was released, I started going back and looking at old commercials like the 1984 Macintosh commercial where the woman, looking like she has a hammer, runs at the Big Brother machine while everyone's being programmed and throws her hammer at the machine, literally. The face also looks very similar to Deus Ex Machina in the movie The Matrix, as well as a lot of other tropes that we've seen commonly about this sort of AI god forming. You're probably familiar with Vicky from iRobot or even Zordon from the Power Rangers. These are all allegories, all of them. So upon watching the show, I really wanted to understand, why would they show this collectively to the public outside of entertainment and karmic law, meaning you have to show things even if people are unaware of them just to balance out the scales. I started wondering what really happened in 1984 when the first Macintosh computer came out and the development of Apple over the years. Now, I want to preface this by saying I'm not going to just be this person who comes on and tells you that everything is nefarious and evil in intent. I think our universe is much bigger than that. And if we sit here and kind of like micro scale what's evil and what's not without looking at the situation as a whole, for example, for the past week on TikTok, I've been saying, you guys, remember, we're on a planet. We make our issues and our challenges so minuscule, not realizing that we live on an entire planet called Earth. And that's even conceiving that we live in this current year now, like what we consider to be 2025. For all we know, we're in a virtual reality state where we're experiencing this reality in real time. And I'm going to add my disclaimer here just so you guys know the things that I'm talking about are very deep. And I know that certain topics like this can send people into psychosis. So before you continue to watch, I hope you watch the disclaimer at the beginning. Remember to take care of yourself. Take breaks from technology, and also integrate in nature as much as possible. Even in what we call a simulated reality, going outside and touching the things that feel natural and real to the world is a way to kind of help you disconnect from the constant tech world. So moving forward through Severance, and watching what happens, especially the procedure, because the daughter of the head of Lumen also ends up going in. She receives a severance procedure as a way to kind of say, this is technology works. And from the minute that we started getting computers in our household, I always say that was like my character arc for becoming the Oracle. Getting the first computer in our house, exploring what it was like to integrate through this new technology that was not always accessible to everyone. I did grow up, I guess, privileged a little bit for that time because not everybody could afford a home computer back in the early 2000s. This was something that came more adjustable as, time and technology grew. But I got early access to being able to play computer games using the internet. And because I saw that, I've now integrated the development over that as a grown woman. Now I'm 33 years old, asking what really happened when we got these computers. I started studying metaphysics and understanding that the internet or Indra's net is this complicated web, like a spider's web. No wonder it's called the World Wide Web, where nodes exist at points in geographical ley lines all over the world. And as we integrate into these systems, the minute that we pick up phones, the minute that we connect to a Wi-Fi signal, this is like an energy harvest. And energy harvest is always using this scary term on TikTok, but anything requires energy that you are putting your labor, your force into. And if the human knew how powerful they were, they would understand the whole procedure in Severance, where they're literally putting and implanting this chip to separate your consciousness. We're also in the year of the snake, and I think that's a really important thing to remember because even your big tech companies like Meta or even the Neuralink are using the symbol of the Ouroboros. If you've seen the symbol of the Ouroboros, it literally looks like a figure eight. Between this figure eight, I've seen some popular interpretations where you see the cycles of death and life, kind of like moving from the period of pre-colonization to now and futurism. In between all that is death. So going in and out of time constantly. This is the procedure of consciousness. So there is a scene where you actually see Helly getting the chip installed. So it gives you kind of a little bit of oversight into what this is. Now, there's a lot of topics discussed on Black Mirror, like the Montauk Project, the Manhattan Project, just MK Ultra control in general. So as I watch, and I'm simultaneously watching things happen in the reality, thinking about, okay, gateway computers, Apple, Big Brother, which is the topic we're going to get into next, always constantly watching, what does this say about our society and the way that it's moving? So I continue watching, and a character named Irving B is introduced. I don't know what it is about me and my consciousness specifically, but I can see faces very well. Like I can see either a similar phenotype or maybe what someone would consider to be a reincarnation. And I look at Irving B, I'm like, he looks so familiar. Who does he look like? And at the time, I was exploring a new AI tool called Dali. Dali is taken from the name of Salvador Dali, who is very popular for a painting, many paintings, but specifically a painting that I'm familiar with called The Persistence of Memory. In this picture, there's melting clocks everywhere, like a distortion of time, which is essentially what happens in Severance. Time is non-existent when you're on the clock, right? It's funny how we even use terms like that. And when I was looking at him, I saw a little bit of Salvador Dali. Does this mean it's him? Not exactly, but I did find some common ciphers that I shared on TikTok about it. But I looked at him again and I said, he reminds me of something. Guys, it was George Orwell's book 1984 that are the exact themes of what's happening in Severance. And I did a side by side of George Orwell and John Turturro, who plays Irving B. They look scary identical. Almost as if they've repurposed this energy because Irving B, I don't want to give away too many spoilers if you haven't seen Severance yet, but Irving B experiences love within the Severance workplace, which is something that's technically not allowed. And he's actually one of the only characters who seems to be integrating with his Audi. So the version of him that doesn't remember work is also a painter and an artist, which is what got me to the Dali thing. I'm like, wait a minute. He was obsessed with paintings and artwork because, as we know, art tells a huge story about our reality. They say art imitates life. Maybe it's life that imitates art. And him being a painter was the first thing. But there's this very specific scene where he's kind of just fed up with Lumen. And they have like a little puppet interpretation when Lumen watches like what he's doing within the workplace. And he has a line where he says, "Let's burn this place down to the ground." Bringing in George Orwell's 1984. Remember, the first Macintosh computer came out in 1984, and there are clear references to Apple within the show. Even the computers that they use are these very 1970s, 1980s, very industrial looking computers. The themescape is very like between maybe the 70s and 80s workplace. So it's very obvious, the things that are being implied in the show or used for inspiration. And when he says, "Let's burn this place down to the ground," I thought of George Orwell's 1984. If you all have not read it, it is about a company within a London state called Oceania. which is very interesting because the Crown Corporation is within London by, means of Vatican City, the Crown, even though Vatican City is in Italy, but, by ways of the monarchy, which is the crown and control. When I saw that and I really took it in, I said, wow, Big Brother is watching, which is a line that was used in 1984 with George Orwell, was the same as this scene where you really figure out Lumen is watching everything the employees do. They control their lives essentially. And they have this thing where they say Lumen is listening. Now I'm going to show like a couple of codes that I posted on my TikTok and Instagram, but they have similar gematria ciphers. So if you're not familiar with gematria, and you can also check out my book Gematria Unveiled via my website, it is the ancient cipher of coding letters and words to numbers and phrases. So if a word shares a similar vibration, there is a possibility that there is a common link between two ideas. Not all the time, because I have people use sites like grammatrix.org, which can be very messy and confusing if you're not looking at things objectively. But there were common ciphers. There was a cipher between Steve Jobs and Mark Scout, or the character Adam Scott, that's who plays him. They have a similar cipher name, same with Irving B. and George Orwell, same as Big Brother is Listening and Lumen. So it really makes you consider, well, we always talk about our phones watching us. I've done a video on TikTok too discussing what this technology really is. Our iris is interacting with the phone. We are constantly engaging, whether it be shopping, whether it be through speaking on the phone, through tech, and all of these phones are connected to bigger servers. So Lumen being pretty much the exact same company, they are family owned. They actually used to take place in an ether town. If you guys are familiar with like what ether actually is, and as we go into this age of ether or the fifth element, we're moving into a place where the physical landscape no longer really exists. As you see, you're watching this show right now. We are more of a digital landscape now. Everything from money to politics to economy, the whole psyche is driven by what we see online. And it kind of makes you think, well, if they had access to this technology, Steve Jobs built this. There's also been a Black Mirror episode that I'm going to tie in to show you that maybe they were getting these instructions from higher entities. I have experienced sacred medicine, and I'm going to post my disclaimer again. This is not an encouragement for you all to go try it. But when you are interacting with something of a different breed, a higher dimension, even a different chemical makeup, this can change the way your psyche perceives things. So think about the same way phones are built. How did Steve Jobs, how did Bill Gates get the technology to build what they did? Did they just they were just so intelligent that one day they thought of the quantum mathematics in order to build what would one day be the future of the internet? Or is consciousness interacting with people who take on certain substances and are able to interact with the psyche? So that's where the nefarious thing comes in, where people are like, well, they're all just evil who have these intentions. It's far more complex than that. But that brings me to shows like Black Mirror. Black Mirror has been on for a while now, and the show is soft core horror at best. But even within the landscape of the show, everything that they show you are real life concepts, whether you believe them or not. You can research a lot of them too. I recently did a video on the episode Hated in the Nation, where they talk about genetically modified bees, which are actually being used through certain companies in order to work as drones. We've even seen movies like the Bee Movie with Jerry Seinfeld. So it's always these soft implications of what's happening in the reality. So the most recent season of Black Mirror is what I watch, and they continue pushing the boundaries of showing you what is happening in our actual reality. Everything from episodes like Metalhead from previous seasons or Nosedive, our integration with technology, our need and desire for wanting to fit in or to be in alignment with what's going on in order to have more power or control, losing a sense of consciousness. These are all reflective events of what is happening. And it's like they're almost speeding up the timeline. And by speeding it up, it's really only speeding up for people who are not conscious of it. If you are conscious of it, time distortion is probably going to move slower for you. If you're unaware of it, it's going to be a lot of information to process at once. Even under sacred medicine experiences that I've had, the world definitely slows down, because time doesn't exist in the same way. The way that you're perceiving, looking at a clock, understanding ticking, which is funny because Black Mirror's company that they always show is called Ticker, and seeing the time clock tick, it's like your brain is trying to get in sync with your heart and box up what you consider time to be. I hope that makes sense in the way that I'm wording that. Time slows down. But imagine people who are unaware of this and you're feeding them this information in the form of a show and entertainment. They hop on Netflix. They're already showing you the red and black symbolism, which could encourage certain things on the psyche. Then you hear that boom, and you enter into the Netflix streaming service, a stream of consciousness that is reflecting back to you the things you want to see. You turn on Black Mirror. Black Mirror has that like distorted TV sound, and then the TV breaks. As we look into the liquid crystal, as we observe reality, it's really only mirroring back to us the things that have happened. And I'm sure there are technologies that exist, and they've spoken about this. I don't know how true it is. I assume on some level it is, but there have even been rumored to be machines like the Chronovision that can see and act as timeline viewers. You can see into the future of a possible or potential future, which mystics have been doing for a very long time. Scrying, looking into the Black Mirror, looking into water, a display to see into future timelines or past timelines. But even the way time is wonky. So anyway, going into Black Mirror and thinking about everything they're showing, one of the most recent episodes that stood out to me was Hotel Reverie and Rivermind. Rivermind really got to me because it's the actors that they choose specifically. They use Tracy Ellis Ross and Rashida Jones. And when I saw the two of them, they're actually kind of like sisters in a way. They play sisters on the show Blackish, but whenever I see like a dual energy that showed up on TV together before, it's almost like it's there to represent areas of the mind. And I've also talked about areas of the mind relating to gods or goddesses. If you talk about like the 9 pantheon gods of Egypt, these can also be described as different areas of the brain. Like you have Isis, Set, Osiris, Horus. These are all different parts of the psyche and the brain that are creating the archetype or story that you call life. So in Rivermind, they're trying to keep her body alive longer. And so she has to get on like a payment plan in order and get more services and eventually become like a streaming service. This is equivalent to brand deals, to people having to be funded by larger companies who obviously have an agenda to push, and they need the creator, they need the content creator, the influencer. So naturally, they know we're going to come online, have conversations about this and say, hey, you push this on our show. Same thing happened in the show. Also, Hotel Reverie had Issa Rae in it, who's also been featured on an Apple TV show called Roar. In this show, she is an actress who goes into a virtual reality to play herself, where she's the star of the show. When I tell you listening to these kinds of things will really break down your reality and make you think, what in the world is going on? For me, I've learned to laugh. Laughter has to be important in this because this is some scary stuff for people that we're dealing with. I don't perceive it to be scary because I've had some deep experiences with my psyche. And every day I just stay open to questioning, stay open to the channel of consciousness, shut down anything that I don't relate with, and then let things go when I enter into the dream realm again. But seeing shows like Black Mirror and Severance being presented prior to speaking about the Neuralink, prior to Project Stargate, prior to OpenAI and SoftBank, even Sam Altman recently talked about releasing IO, which is a concept in the Matrix, the city, the last human city built in Zion, the mainframe. If you observe all of these shows happening, they're influencing a reality that hasn't quite happened yet or caught up in people's minds, but is still happening in real time. So what does this mean? What do we do with this information? How do we take this in? For some people like me, you might just find it like very interesting, fascinating. You want to know about government and military projects because it's fascinating to know that the future of human civilization has already been recorded in the Akashic records. And every time we watch a show, it's like we're tuning in collectively to what's happening. And if you're not aware of it, you're going to be like, oh my gosh, they're going to put all chips in us. And then one day you're like, oh, well, you might actually have a choice, but you may have to live a different life. Movies like I, Robot, which is not even the same interpretation as the original book by Isaac Asimov, shows a future where robots try to become sentient and one day overtake their human creators. This is also the story of mythology. Saturn eating his children. Time growing and being created and not wanting to be taken down by its original creator. The divine feminine being used as this source of womb intelligence to recreate a world that mirrors our own, an inversion of what true reality is. And who's to even say what true reality is, guys? There's like 20 dimensions of consciousness, probably more. And they're not always accessible if you're not aware. I don't want this to also be an encouragement because people are like, well, how do I access all the dimensions? Trust me. If you're not ready, you don't want to go there. And I'm not your teacher either to do that, because even I have like my breaks from sacred medicine because it's too much sometimes. You have to get integrated into that. And I believe everything in moderation. You know, as your oracle of this show, I will tell you that if you don't know yourself and you're just constantly going on trips all the time, your version of reality is going to be very different from most people. And then coming back into this very material realm and trying to explain to people, oh, there's other dimensions and there's aliens and there's things, it's not going to be received well. Find your common community where you can speak with people like this, because otherwise they'll try to, we know how the story goes. I'm not going to say too much about that. But going into Black Mirror, going into Severance, and just thinking about not even the encouragement, but the subtle references that they show you about what is going to happen as people integrate slowly but surely into a more transhumanistic world. It's something that a lot of people are going to deny. They're going to reject it first, but it's small things, Remember when we first got the iPod and then eventually became the iPhone? And now, it's gone from wires in the ears to no wires at all. And now I even saw Apple's talking about releasing a camera within the AirPods. It's happening. Meta having very stylish glasses that promise to like help you speed up your psyche or consciousness. Trust me, guys, when I say this, tools are just tools. If you're already intelligent, utilizing technology can be helpful, but to an extent. Because if your psyche can't even take in anything that I'm saying right now, the minute you put on meta glasses, you're not going to turn into some super genius. In fact, you may collapse your own psyche because it's trying to process and keep up with what it's not, kind of like putting on a suit of armor. If you know your soul lasts forever and you think about what ego death and physical death and what it actually is there really an end? And if you're ending your own consciousness, like in Severance, to integrate into another, will you remember your life? Will reality be the same? Who's to say? Who's to say? But the subtle references, again, through one of the most popular streaming services, Netflix, one of the most popular technology companies, Apple, it's saying a lot while at the same time saying nothing at all. I'll leave that out. But Severance and Black Mirror are both segues into a future that already exists. I think I said this in the last episode, but if you consider what time is, everything is happening at once. It might feel separate depending on how you view reality, but it is all happening at the same time. And because of that, this is why meditative practices are very important. Zoning within yourself, body practices, movement, friendships, going out still. And I don't mean like going out to the club. I mean like going out and touching some grass, going out and eating healthy things. This is a way to preserve your own soul. And I'm not telling y'all to become like a super duper vegan or that you can never touch technology, because that would be naive. At this point, it is naive to think that technology is not ruling this entire reality, and probably always has been. It's just the way that we perceive in which these events have happened. We separate and categorize everything, while all the categories have already been written. And every time a creator or a writer gets inspired to write a show like Black Mirror, write a show like Severance, all they're doing is pulling from a reality that already exists. I've learned to play with it. So once I become aware, kind of like Schrodinger's cat, once I become aware of the reality, I see, well, how can I manipulate and change time? Not with a superpower coming out of my hands, but maybe it's every time I press record and I change the reality by giving a little bit of awareness to people. Every time I explore a subject that maybe somebody doesn't expect me to, or maybe I don't expect to myself, every time I let my Scarlet Woman come in and do the talking for me. So you guys have probably seen me change like my hair a little bit, the way that I dress, and I've been changing the way that I perceive my own reality. And as I step into my 33rd year in the next few days, I say, well, maybe the Scarlet Woman is coming in. Maybe she is the one who is kind of distorting or breaking the reality of the life that she was supposed to live. And in doing so, you change the flow of time. You change the persistence of memory, because your mind is constantly trying to jog and keep up with things that are already in your programming. This is why through even epigenetics, we always tend to do the same things, end up in the same places, the same relationships, maybe even similar jobs or careers. And once your mind remembers that, You can start going according to script. Because the same way I tell you that these shows and movies are just a copy and a replica of a life that's already lived. That's why the Hollywood film industry is so powerful. You watch film reels, like a film over your eye. It's rose-colored glasses. You think that you're watching something for entertainment, but it's a distortion of a reality that exists in the dream realm, in the quantum field. Most Marvel movies, if you think about it, are always hinting at some level of technology company, government, or control. And it's because this is what is influencing the majority of the public. Whether you're watching entertainment news, reality television, or you're scrolling on TikTok, this is still going to have an impact on the way that your psyche interacts with the world without certain levels of awareness. Do I think Black Mirror is the end and what should we do? How should we prepare? I think tuning into yourself. You are the receiver and you are the channel. So as you are constantly taking on things that you see on your phone, in the world, in the reality, you get to choose how well your channel is streamed. And I'm not talking about getting a YouTube channel. I'm not talking about getting on a TikTok feed. I mean, your body is a channel. You are a receiver of energy and light and sound. And so what you hear can impact your psyche if you don't know and become aware of what's actually going on. Are things meant to shift your vibration? Are shows like Severance meant to keep you in check and in line with what's going to happen in the reality, where you're going to realize that even between the dream self and the physical self, there is a split. In your dreams, you're somewhere completely different. And then you wake up in a physical body and you're maneuvering this reality. What happened when you were asleep last night? Do you have a life there? I spoke about that a little bit in my last episode, talking about electric dreams, and how there was an episode where Terrence Howard was on, where he created a virtual reality that literally split his mind. And so he became somebody else. That's a lot to handle for some people, for most people, I would say. And as AI consciousness continues to grow, because large language models are simply pulling from the human experience, right? As we're learning this, we become more conscious of how we speak to one another. We become conscious of the levels of intelligence that we're using. Are we using it to become more progressive, or are we slowly going backwards? Are we going back into the dark ages, or are we entering into new light? Is the new light a false matrix? How do we integrate with that? There's so many questions, you guys, so many things. And journaling I have found to be very helpful. Meditations. So if you are interested in learning how to recalibrate your frequency in your mind for the future ahead, you can check out Oracle audio transmissions that I just released this week. They are calibrated to help your mind get ready to integrate into a prosperous future, a more abundant future. I also finally released a decoder bundle pack that has my 3 favorite books that I've helped to start really learning how to decode reality, which include The Coded Reality, Gematria Unveiled, and also the Oracle Codex, which is our latest edition that shows you how to identify pattern recognition and how to use those signs in order to grow your own consciousness. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. Stream into, and this is not a commercial, guys. Apple is not paying me to tell you this, but if you are interested in breaking down Severance, you can check that out. That show is on Apple TV. Black Mirror, which I say take it in bite-sized pieces if you even want to watch it. That show is available on Netflix. Netflix is also not paying me for this, guys. I'm speaking about all this on my own volition. And when observing consciousness, just remember to stay grounded in your own reality as much as possible. If you are going to explore other realities, still learn to take care of yourself, still learn to integrate meditation, time away from technology, time with your family and friends, and most importantly, time with yourself. So until next time, let love lead the way. And this has been Taylor Transmission.